some unique things that we've seen so far. So let's just talk about Isaiah and what have we seen that's different. We've been going through historical books since the beginning. So what's different about Isaiah than what we've been going through historically?
The way you just described, it's like the way it's written. Like it's not written like prose. It's written like you said, like Isaiah spin the verse and then God spin the verse and then and then how it's
Oh, you're the camera. You're the camera. You turn it the other way. Otherwise, it'll have black things on the side. There you go. All
how
right.
sometimes it'll be a vision and then interrupted by the actual words of God and.
Yep. So we definitely are getting God speaking and quoted himself, right? And we're getting a lot of that. Other thing we're going to see is just varied approaches, right? We're going to see different illustrations being used. We're going to see different devices being used to deliver God's word. So when you're looking at a prophet, especially somebody like Isaiah who prays for 62 plus years, hey guys, you got to shut that door or something. All right, so when you look at somebody who served God for 62 plus years, you're going to see a lot of different approaches. Otherwise, he wouldn't be successful. All right, so let's get into it and let's read Isaiah 5, and we'll start at verse 8, and we'll read through the end of the chapter.
Woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field, until there is no more room, and you are made to dwell alone in the midst of the land. The Lord of hosts has sworn in my hearing, surely many houses shall be desolate, large and beautiful houses without inhabitant. For 10 acres of vineyard shall yield but one bath, and a homer of seed shall yield but an ephah. Woe to those who rise early in the morning, that they may run after strong drink, who tarry late into the evening as wine inflames them. They have lyre and harp, tambourine and flute, and wine at their feasts, but they do not regard the deeds of the Lord, or see the work of his hands. Therefore my people go into exile for lack of knowledge. Their honored men go hungry, and their multitude is parched with thirst. Therefore Sheol has enlarged its appetite and opened its mouth beyond measure, and the nobility of Jerusalem and her multitude will go down, her revelers and he who exalts in her. Man is humbled, and each one is brought low, and the eyes of the haughty are brought low. But the Lord of hosts is exalted in justice, and the holy God shows himself holy in righteousness. Then shall the lambs graze as in their pasture, and nomads shall eat among the ruins of the rich. Woe to those who draw iniquity with cords of falsehood, who draw sin as with cart ropes, who say, let him be quick, let him speed his work that we may see it. Let the counsel of the Holy One of Israel draw near, and let it come that we may know it. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine, and valiant men in mixing strong drink, who acquit the guilty for a bribe, and deprive the innocent of his right. Therefore, as the tongue of fire devours the stubble, and as dry grass sinks down in the flame,
Take them
so their root will be as rottenness, and their blossom go up like dust. For they have rejected the law of the Lord of hosts, and have despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. Therefore the anger of the Lord was kindled against his people, and he stretched out his hand against them and struck them, and the mountains quaked, and their corpses were as refuse in the midst of the streets. For all this his anger is not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still. He will raise a signal for nations far away, and whistle for them from the ends of the earth. And behold, quickly, speedily they come. None is weary, none stumbles, none slumbers or sleeps. Not a waistband is loose, not a sandal strap broken. Their arrows are sharp, all their bows bent. Their horses' hooves seem like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind. Their roaring is like a lion. Like young lions they roar. They growl and seize their prey. They carry it off, and none can rescue. They will growl over it on that day, like the growling of the sea. And if one looks to the land, behold, darkness and distress, and the light is darkened by its clouds.
All right. What are we seeing? Are there any adults in the kitchen side?
Mhm.
Would y'all be able to tell them to not stop yelling down there?
I can go back. Hold on. I got it. Oh, yeah.
It's too late. All right, so let's get into it. What are we seeing described in chapter 5 except for the decay of a society, right? We're seeing the decay of a society before the society has decayed itself. And it's being described. And towards the end, we get to see what specific means will be used to destroy that society. But let's just talk about what causes the destruction of the society. And look at this passage as a kind of describing of the cracks in that society, and then finally describing what causes that, and then finally describing the means that God will use to end it. So the first one, it starts talking about, and let's go back to verse 8. And let's look there at the very first section, which I'll call verse 8 through 12. What's going on in 8 through 12? What would we say is the primary sin that's being focused on there? I'm sorry, verse 8 through 10, I'm sorry.
I'm just gonna take a stab at it, but is it excess?
Definitely, excess could be definitely be a description of it. And when you say excess, we could look at the internal motivation of greed, right?
Yeah.
Right? Excess, greed, describing similar things, right? If you look at it, you see excess. And when you look at what's motivating their mind, their spiritual state is one of greed. And where do we see that? Well, join house to house. What are they doing? Well, let's just describe it in a sense of historical fact. We know that when Ahab's dad bought the hill, he bought a hill and he called it Samaria. And after he bought that hill, he died. Ahab took it over. And Ahab wasn't satisfied with owning that whole hill. And so there was a guy who had a house right next to him. His name was Naboth. And Naboth owned that vineyard. And what did Ahab do? Ahab's wife just hatched a plot, had the dude killed. Why did they have him killed? Because his house is next to theirs. And what did they end up doing? They ended up establishing a larger plot of land. Now let's talk about it in an even bigger sense. If anybody remembers, there's something about the book of Joshua that makes it very hard to read all the way through it. There's something that happens in the middle of that book. And it's not hard to read the first part of the book because it's all about these battles and these exciting conquests. But after you get to this exciting conquest, there's a huge part in the middle that most people's eyes gloss over. Do anybody know what part I'm talking about? There's a part where they divide the land between the tribes. And this part takes several chapters. But let's just talk about it. They divide the land. In that division of the land, how did they divide it? By lot. By lot. Completely by blind luck. But was it really by luck? Now let's think about it in this sense. God had prophesied through Moses and through Jacob about the 12 tribes before they even got into the land. And one of the things that he prophesied was that Simeon and Levi will be divided throughout the land. And if you look at the lots of land that were given, most of the other tribes were able to stay together. But guess who didn't? Levi had cities throughout, and Simeon had cities, just had a territory inside of Judah. So was God's word fulfilled? And when you look at it in a larger sense, we could say this. The families, not only were the tribes allotted territory, but so were the clans. In each tribe, there were clans. In each clan, there were families. And in each family, there were individuals. And it could be said this. that each piece of land in Israel was divinely, sovereignly given out to individuals. In a similar way to heaven. We go to heaven, Nick is going to be able to say, this is the spot that God gave me. Right? Now, what if Nick was to try to give that away? The first question you got to ask is, could he give it away? Well, no. Right? He couldn't give it away. Why? Because it's not his to give. There's another question. What if I like Nick's spot and I want to take it? Could I take it? I couldn't take it. Because it's not mine to take, and I don't have the power to take the one that protects his land. Now let's look at Israel. Is Israel that much different than heaven? In some senses it is, right? Definitely there are some differences. But there's a big reason why the promised land is always considered to be a good analogy for heaven. Because it is. And when you look at how the promised land was divided, it was divided in such a way that somebody could say, this is the land that God gave you. And that's why when you look at the Proverbs or you look at the law, they'll say, curse is the one who moves the ancient landmark. Why? Because that's the way they used to divide the land when God gave them the land. So they knew what was theirs. So if you took what somebody else got from God, you were always wrong. Now you could buy it, you could sell it, but even then, it was meant to return to the family at the end of the Jubilee years, right? In other words, you could only borrow it for a little bit. You could never truly take what belonged to them that was given by the God. Now that's so applicable in so many different reasons, right? We could take that in so many different areas. We could use that in different analogies in so many ways. Our sexuality, abortion, right? Government sovereignty. You can use it in so many different ways. But here, let's just talk about it literally. That God had given people land, and some people through riches and greed decided to thrust people off of that land and take it for themselves. Who did they really offend? Now, you could kill a person. And if you kill enough people, nobody's going to say anything. Right? It's been said this. If you kill one person, an outcry. But if you kill 1,000, silence. What does that saying mean? What that saying means, if you kill one person, there's a lot of people to talk about it. But if you prove that you're going to keep on killing, people are like, this dude a killer. I'm not saying nothing. Did you see something? Nope, I didn't see nothing. Right? No snitch policy. Why is a no snitch policy really hell? It's not hell because most people try to be gangster, even though some people say that's the reason. It's because people don't want to wake up one day and have a gun in their mouth. So they don't snitch. That's pretty much it, right? If people thought that they would truly be protected if they snitched, they would be more likely to snitch. Because nobody is so hard that they won't snitch. Even mafia people snitched on mafia people. And they was the hardest people that you'll meet, right? You look at people like in Al-Qaeda. They watered and boarded them a couple times, they snitching. And Al-Qaeda don't even be mad. They be like, well, we knew if you got waterboarded 3 times, we surprised you held out that long. And when you look at these things, the point of saying it is this. You could silence men, but you can't silence God. Your riches might impress people. Whatever you have on this planet could impress people. It doesn't impress God. Because all of it belongs to Him. And the curse that God gives them is, what you did out of greed, God will take and take its productivity. And that's the real curse, right? Because when you look at Ecclesiastes, it says, cursed is the man. In other words, there's a big section in Ecclesiastes where it says, it is nothing worse than a man to be blessed with all this good and not be able to eat of it. Ecclesiastes talks about that often. The idea that you could have so much, but you don't get anything out of it. Imagine a guy who got all this money and he think he got an Instagram model. But he knows secret down, she's just with him for the money. And when you look at it, what did you really gain?
And those are usually the types that have lived an empty life and try to sink themselves in drugs and alcohol and whatnot. And usually end up being on the news or having a drug overdose. You know, they just try to fill that emptiness with so many other things, you know?
It's a point where you could have so much that you have so little.
Mm-hmm.
And Solomon said it this way: blessed is the average worker. Now we would look at it the other way. We would say, Solomon, man, you are a multi-billionaire. Blessed are you. But he said, blessed is the guy because he goes to sleep and he doesn't have to worry about anything. I own this whole kingdom and I always worry. There's never a moment that I go to sleep and it's heavy. Somebody can always be waking me up and saying the Philistines are attacking. Somebody can always be waking me up and say a fire burned up all my land. I lost $1 billion. My son is rebelling. These nobles over here want to revolt. There can always be something. The more you have, the more you got to worry about. Another preacher, he said, and I don't necessarily like this preacher, but what he said about this was true. He said, the more you have, the more you have. Now, I know that seems weird, but the point is that the more you have, the more you have. If you have more money, also with it comes more maintenance of that money. You got more kids, more diapers, right? Now you might have more joy because you have more birthday parties. They have more friends. You got all that stuff, but you also have more dangers, more people who want to take advantage of your own kids, more discipline you have to do, right? More temptations the kids have to face because somebody who got one kid only got one kid to worry about. You got 8. And it gets to that point where more just means more. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't seek to be blessed. I'm not saying it in that sense. But I'm simply saying that each thing comes with its own temptation. And if you try to put yourself in a position where you envy the one who has what you don't, you truly don't understand him. Because you've not been in his shoes.
You really gotta marvel at the genius of that punishment, though. To curse the productivity.
Mm-hmm.
You look at, we live in a country where they say, if you dream it, you can achieve it. If you put this effort forth, if you're so motivated. And God is saying, I don't care how motivated you are, how much resources you have, you're not getting anything from this. It's like that it just kind of blows my mind. Like that's like the smartest thing he could have done.
Yeah, it's a really big curse because if you think about it, I mean, I hate to be vulgar, but no kids are not really listening right now, but I'll say it. But it's almost like saying you could try to have sex with somebody, but you'll never get an orgasm. It'd be like that. It would be like saying you could eat this food and it could cook and it could look really good, but when you get it in your mouth, you won't be able to taste it.
Oh, torture.
These are the things I'm talking about. You can get to a point, and the reason I use the sexual one is because in our minds we know that when you go for a sexual pleasure, you're building to a point, right? You're building to a point. When you got that land and you got to the productivity, you built to a point. And you're saying, ooh, I'm finally gonna get there. And you don't get there.
Never.
And that's frustrating, right? Talk to somebody that's sexually frustrated. They're angry. They're frustrated. It's the same thing with productivity frustration. You got there, you got all this. What happened? I put all this money in crypto, why I only got $500? You mad. Your productivity went down. I went to the store, I heard the PlayStation cost $200. I got there, it was $300. No, I don't got nothing. I went there with all this anticipation that I was gonna go home with a brand new game. Guess what I got? Nothing. And that's the curse. The curse is that God will let you get it, but you won't enjoy it. That's a big curse.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the next one. Next excess, as Aaron put it. Look at verse 11 and 12. It kind of starts here, but I want us to notice that this is something that goes throughout. And what it is pretty obvious, right? It's alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
Alcoholism. But we know that in society. How many times have you heard somebody, they come on the job and what do they say? We got so wasted. We started drinking at 11. And they sound so stupid. Why? Because drinking does make you look stupid. Nobody can tell me that it doesn't. Because I've been around it too long.
Man.
I've seen so much drinking. I've never seen a person look smart while drinking unless they only drink a little bit.
Yes.
You can look good when you drink if you only drink a little. If you sip, you can look sophisticated. But you start sloshing, you look stupid. Drinking does make you stupid. And what happens is that there are some people who literally act like they're doing a heroic act when they take a shot. They beat their chest, they act like they just won a war. You ain't did nothing, you drunk something, bro. We are not impressed that you poured a liquid down your throat. But he is impressed with himself. She is impressed with herself. She drunk something and kissed somebody else while she drunk it. Ooh, we all watch. Oh, crazy. Oh, yeah, wow. What do I get out of that? Nothing. But we all supposed to be impressed. He says, woe to those. And later on, it's going to say, woe to those whose heroes that drink wine. And you might say, people always say, like, oh, this, you know, what are you using that phrase? But come on, have a sense of humor. Because that's what people do, right? Ooh, yeah, that burned when it went down. Ooh, yeah. People act like they did some great feat when they drunk. But what did they really do? Nothing. Nothing. And I'm not saying that there is no pleasure in drinking. Now, I've never had tasted alcohol, so I don't really know the true feeling of it because I took a vow. But I know that drinking just a little bit of alcohol does make you feel good. If it didn't, why would people do it? And I know it can make you feel happy. And I know it can make you be so happy that some of your problems seem to go away. But when alcohol goes away, the problems are still there. And not only that, how ridiculously expensive alcohol is, but that's a whole nother point.
It can cause other problems.
Yes, it can cause other problems.
Every week I have patients with alcohol withdrawal. Every single week.
People don't talk about that. Right? People don't talk about
They
that.
dedicated their lives to this.
There's a reason why we in Wisconsin are heavier than most places. Because we drink. How much calories is in a beer? And people be throwing them down. It's the reason why we call it the phrase a beer belly. Right? It definitely is not producing the six packs that you see on a Miller Lite commercial. What are they doing? They're partying. They're partying. And this is something that you do throughout the society. But here's the thing. The example of a society that's breaking down is a society that can take the small pleasures and turn them into life goals. Right? If at a point you stop seeing sex as a pleasure that is attained along the way and the goal, you'll be ruined. If at a point you seen getting buzzed as the goal and not something that just happens when you're celebrating something else, think of it. If you sit there and you say, dude, we're celebrating the fact that I've been married for this long. We're celebrating the fact that I'm 30 years old, that I'm 40 years old. That's worth celebrating. And if you want to drink a little bit, I can't do it because I took a vow, but I'm not mad at you, right? I'm not mad at you. But if the whole point thing you're looking forward to that whole week is I'm getting wasted, you're ruining yourself. You have ruined yourself. And that's where society breaks down, right? Because it's a real tenuous line between seeking a pleasure along the way and only seeking the pleasure. And you could be ruined. And we all know it, right? We all know it. We all have known people that when we were younger, they were good looking, they were intelligent, they seemed like they could do something. And when you look at them 10 years later, don't they look like they aged 30 years?
Yeah.
And you start to realize, even if this person does live as long as me, they'll wish they hadn't. You know how sad that is? To look at somebody and be like, they'd be better off dead. And it to be true. It's one thing if you say that and you just a cruel, mean person. Then you just being mean. But it's a whole nother thing to say it and be like, dang it, that's true. Right? That's true. Now, in the middle of describing this breaking down society, do we see some spiritual markers? So let's just talk about those and just pick those verses out. Like our point went out in verse 13, right? Therefore my people go into exile for lack of knowledge. Right? Now he's hinting at something that he has not described before. Now, let me rephrase that a little bit. Earlier passages did talk about the fact that they would be under siege, right? The passage right before this talk about the vineyard being under siege. And earlier passages talk about being under siege a lot. He's been hinting and saying things like this already. So he's been building at it, but he hasn't been saying it explicitly. But now he's saying, you're going into exile. I know somebody who wrote this prophecy was like, wait, what? We got a whole nation. Why would I be going into exile? No, you're going into exile. That would be like me saying, yeah, that's the reason San Francisco's going to be taken over by China. Because, wait, what? You just dropped a bomb on me, right? You just dropped a bomb on me, and now you're just going to go on to some spiritual reality? But the truth of the matter is that the consequence is less important than the cause. That's why he could just drop that in. Because if you look at Isaiah just as hey, I'm just looking for future prophecies, you'll be missing the whole point. It's not meant to fascinate you with the accuracy of his predictions, even though they are always perfect. Because God told him it. But that's not the point. The point is that sin always has an inevitable consequence. Why? Because God has determined it to be so. God has decided that if you do this sin, there will be this consequence. And it's not a matter of if, it's a line. Now, you may not know where your specific consequence might be. You might think you're smarter than everybody else. Somebody else's consequence for having sexual immorality is to have a pregnancy they don't want. But your consequence might be something different. But you don't get to make that line. Only God does. But there is an inevitable line that we can't dismiss. It's just that I don't get to pick it for you, and you don't get to pick it for you. And that's what's deceitful about it, right? Because you see me fall into a sin, and you say, well, that happened to him. That'll probably happen to me, but it doesn't. You say, well, maybe God doesn't care when I do it. No, he just got a different line for you. He's connected your sin to a different consequence. And he didn't tell you what it is, and that makes it scarier. If you were wise, that would make it scarier. Because it's not connected to nothing. That's what the world assumes, right? The world assumes if they did this and lightning didn't strike, their sin is not connected to a consequence. And they just don't realize how long a hook God can give them. That's the scary part. Isn't that what he says? Verse 14, therefore Sheol has enlarged its appetite. Hell done just got bigger because of you. That's what he says. I see what you're doing, and I already see hell getting bigger to receive you.
That's scary.
And you might say that's not nice. And it's not nice. It's just true. The prophet is not always nice. And that's important to note, right? The prophet is not always nice. The prophet simply says what God told him to say. Then verse 15, man is humble, each one is brought low. The eyes of the haughty are brought low. There's going to be this time, and we talked about it in chapter 2 when we talked about the mount of the Lord be raised, but everything else will be lowered. It's similar things that's going to happen. Why? Because judgment always has a similar thing. But that's what I talk about, the creative approach of Isaiah. He's going to approach this issue, and you might say, man, if you talk about issues of judgment, how many different ways can you say it? Isaiah's going to say, I got as many ways as you read to the end of this book. Because he's that creative. He's that good, right? He can approach it in a whole bunch of different ways that I can't. He's looking at it. He's saying, whoa, look at this. The Lord of hosts will be exalted in justice. The Lord shows himself holy in righteousness. What will happen? Let's put it this way. What is he saying? For God to be lifted high, sin has to be put down. Now, people always have it the wrong way around, because if you look at Joel Osteen would say, I can just praise God. But Isaiah would say you can't do that. You can't praise God if you don't put sin down. It's like they're on a wheel. And if you want to put God up, you got to put sin down. And if you put sin up, you got to put God down. And if you don't want to put sin down, God will never be exalted the way he deserved to be exalted. And because of that, that's why we have to declare what sin is. We have to. So he starts to describe it. Again, he's talking in verse 17, he's talking about the abandonment of the land. He's just describing it in more blunt terms. No man shall eat the ruins of the rich, right? What he's talking about is, if all the mansions are broken down, who's going to live there? Somebody who just wandered. What if he described your house as a broken ruin? That'd be scary. That's what he's doing. Then, verse 18 through, it just describes excess of sin going to a whole nother level, right? Woe to those who draw iniquity with a cord. In other words, there are things that people do where you just can't help but say, dude, it's almost like you're doing something evil and trying to be evil. It's laughably villainous, right? You ever seen somebody do something so evil, you like, I can't even take it seriously, it was so evil. Right? And in some sense we want to laugh because it's so absurd, but in the other sense we want to cry and be like, how can you do that? Right? How can you do it? Both reactions are appropriate in their own sense, right? When you see somebody like, dude, what are you doing? Like somebody just trips somebody, like, okay, that's kind of funny, but why would you go out of your way? Right? Why do you go out of your way to hurt somebody else? Did that make you happy?
Especially if you see it like in a child or a young adolescent, you're like, whoa, it's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
you don't even have much life that you've lived, and you already have that kind of cynicism.
Yeah, like why are you doing that? Like you see a little kid hit another little kid in the back and he ain't doing nothing to him. You're like, why you do that? It's like laughably
Chucky
violent.
vibes.
But
Sociopath.
yeah. But it says, look at verse 19, how unaware they are. Who say, let him be quick, let him speed his word. In other words, there are some people who say, God ain't real. Well, just let him hurry up and do it if he gonna do something. What happens to those people? Nobody is going to say that when every knee bows and every tongue confesses. Nobody going to say that. Nobody is going to say that when the Son of Man comes back. I was thinking this during the sermon when Dad was talking about the glory of who God is, who Jesus is. And I was thinking of this psalm. Psalm 2 says this. Kiss the Son lest he be angry. It says that. It's like kiss. It's almost like kiss the ring. Kiss the ring of the Son of God, lest he step on your neck. Right? Bow down or be bowed down. It's a powerful chapter. I don't see a whole lot of songs written like that. But it's powerful. It makes you reflect on God's beauty, on his strength. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. People doing that nowadays, right? Tolerance. The idea that there's tolerance, but there's not tolerance for you or me. You could be kicked off of Twitter for calling a man who thinks he's a woman, man. Because he calls himself a woman. Or as somebody put it, and it was a really funny joke, he said, how dare you be offended by another woman's penis in the shower? When you think about it in that sense, it make you laugh, but it make you horrified, because that could be, right? You sitting there at the women's gym, you know, getting your shower after you work out, and there's dude just sitting there stroking his beard. What are you doing in here? I'm a woman too. No, you're not. How dare you? And I'll stare at you if you want, because I'm not only a woman, I'm a lesbian. Now what do you do? Now what do you do? How many people were sitting there, and I forget the lady who changed her name, but Caitlyn Jenner or something like that?
Oh.
Bruce Jenner.
Yeah.
Caitlyn Jenner now.
No, my name is Bruce. I'm calling Bruce.
He could change his name legally. I don't care. But the truth of the matter is, how many people were saying that's a beautiful woman?
It was on the
And they
cover.
was trying to make us all say it.
Yeah.
They was almost like, say it!
Nah,
Say she's beautiful.
he won Woman of the Year. He won Woman of the Year
He's an athlete.
after being a woman for 1 year.
And they don't see how that's an insult to all the other women. And let's just put it another way, because there's something that needs to be very, very blunt about the transgender movement. They are saying a woman is nothing but a vagina.
Pretty much.
Isn't that what they're saying?
And feelings. And feelings.
They ain't even saying that. They just saying, hey, if you got the right anatomy, you're a woman.
Even
I
before
always-
that, they said.
Yeah. I always thought there was way more to a woman than that. If that's all a woman is, then there's nothing wrong with objectifying a woman. You see how twisted the logic is?
That's all a woman is.
If you
unless
look
you're
at a woman
heterosexual.
as just a piece of meat, so do they. They just got a different piece of meat. They changed from one from another. And now they're a woman. Instead of recognizing that God created them, male and female. Male and female, he created them. He created them both in the image of God, but in this different way.
Mm-hmm.
In complementary ways, he created them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there'll be male traits and there'll be female traits. And all of us are a little bit of a mix in male and female traits. That's just natural. That doesn't mean we're bisexual, but it simply means we are mixes of our mothers and fathers. But men should have more masculine traits, but not all, absolutely, right? We all got our feminine traits as men. We got some. And all women should be more feminine, but they're going to have some masculine things, but they're going to mainly be feminine. And so, guess what? Men have nipples. They don't need them.
Useless.
They don't need them. Men don't need them.
I was
But
thinking
guess
that,
what? That's just a little bit of a feminine. That's just an example of the fact that we are not. We have a little bit of feminine traits to it, but we should be majority masculine traits. And that's what makes up our personality, right? You say, hey, this dude is masculine, but so is that guy masculine. You say, how can they all be masculine? They're all different. Because masculine is a big thing. It's not it's not a little small speck. It's a scope, right? It's a big thing. Some dudes got deep voices. I don't have the deepest voice. That would be a trait of mine that would not be as masculine as somebody else's deep voice. Some dudes are taller than me. I'm not that tall. That would be a trait that they're more masculine than me. But I might have more muscles than them. They might be real thin. I might be more masculine than them in that way. I might be tougher than them. They might have a more gentler mentality. But at the end of the day, we're still both men, and we should try to be as masculine as we are in our personality. Reflecting our masculine roles in the calling that God gave us to be men. Because of our different personalities and situations, we might lead our families a little bit different. But we still should lead our families. We might protect women differently at different stages of life. I was thinking about my grandpa Hope before he died. He couldn't necessarily fight for grandma, but he still in his own mind was trying to protect her. You can't never take that away from him. He would always do that. But could he physically sit there and stop a robber? No. Same with my grandpa Kenner. He ain't doing that.
They
You
were-
break into his house,
yeah.
he ain't gonna fight, but he will still try to die for her.
And they protect them emotionally too.
Right. They feel for this.
Yep, because
Yes.
they protect them, and you do that for me. But like, you know, like with at least for me, at my side as a woman, a very much emotional side, and so you know, I have those fears, or you have the different things, and my mind will go places. If you would tell me how much pain you were in, like with the diabetes, if I had even known how bad it really was, I couldn't even have carried that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, God.
What does that tell you?
But
There's
that's
more
yep.
to being a male or female than our physical bodies.
Grandpa did that for Grandma.
Right.
You know he did.
It's more than our physical shape. And that's why if at some point one of us got injured in a horrible accident and I lost my male organ, I could still be a man. Because it's not my organ that makes me a man. It's God who made me a man. And the same with a woman. If she lost her ability to reproduce, that doesn't make her stop being a woman. She'd still be a woman. If she lost her whole lower half of her body, she'd still be a woman. If she had breast cancer and she had to remove her breast, she still would be a woman. Because that's not what makes a woman. it just troubles me so much that people are reducing each other to pieces of meat, while at the same time saying it's wrong to reduce each other to pieces of meat.
That's a good point, actually.
I thought of it like that.
It's funny to me how basic it is. Like you say, like these basic understandings. Like the Bible doesn't say like, woe to these people who kind of blur the lines between or make exceptions. Like they called evil good, and they call good evil.
Yep.
They call bitter sweet and call sweet bitter.
Yes.
Like there's no excuse for this. It is obvious, and it has been rejected.
Yes, it should be something wrong with somebody who calls himself a feminist, who is for women who make pornography. That should be considered absurd, but it's not. That's considered to be a respectable feminist position that women can empower themselves to be in the sex industry. They say they're empowering themselves. They're empowering themselves to be an object. How's that empowering? No man is looking at you when he's looking at his pornography and saying, "That's a powerful woman." No man thinks that.
Man, I would respect that.
Yeah, he ain't saying that.
Sorry.
Who are respecting these women?
Chantel
Who
showing her
want to honor these women? You ain't doing that.
You have the emotional part of femininity. I don't have as much of that.
She's showing her nice and Chantel showing her masculine side. Rolls off.
It's funny to me. I was talking to my girls one time about transgender and trying to explain, what the world is trying to teach them is right and what God actually says. And it was Brianna who just said, like, flat out, I was like, well, it's a man who thinks, he feels like a woman inside. She's like, what does a man know about what a woman feels like inside? That is a very good question. There's no way he would know that.
But they think they know.
And you see all over the world, they say, we don't know what women are thinking. We don't understand what they need. It's like, but all of a sudden, this one does. How?
Yep.
What made him special?
It's just amazing
There's
that
a lot
when
of
you talk
feelings.
about appropriation, cultural appropriation, people will get
How is
offended.
that not gender appropriation?
People will be so offended if Nick said he knew exactly how it felt to be a black man. But if Nick said he felt exactly how it meant to be a woman, nobody be offended.
Well, the other thing is, they try to say that you and Aaron are like not really black or something. Like if you have like they'll do that too. Like, well, you can't really talk about real black men, Brian, because you're
That's
married to a
a
white
whole
woman.
other can of worms.
Yep.
But sorry, anyways.
Yep.
They just always find a way around the truth, is what it
Yep.
is.
Yep.
To make their own truth.
So that's why at the end of the chapter, he talks about the approaching Babylon army, right?
Mm.
He talks about them coming from afar, and then he talks about all these impossibly perfect things, right? He says, not a sandal strap breaks, not a chariot wheel wobbles. In other words, he's talking about things and he's saying, who is creating these perfect opportunities? In other words, when you see something that seems like a perfect accident, it's not perfect. It's God.
That's scary.
When you see something that seems fated, it's God. I'm teaching on the sermon that I'm doing on Sunday. There's a part in it where it says a certain man. There's a part when Ahab died, and it's like he just randomly threw an arrow. That wasn't random. That was God. That was appointed. So when you see something random and it happens, you gotta say, God, what are you doing? Why did you fix reality in such a way? That's letting you know. It's almost like when in the Matrix, when you saw the cat appear twice. You knew somebody was messing with the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
You know God is fixing reality. When you see something happen, you're like, that was impossible. But it happened. God, what are you doing? What are we seeing? All right, so we'll stop there. We finished off this chapter. Any comments or questions, and we'll close?
Seems like this refrain through everything that he was talking about just now is that God doesn't make mistakes, and he most definitely is going to do exactly what he says he's going to do.
Yep, he doesn't miss, right? God is the only one who can swing at a target and never miss.
So we got to be taken a lot more seriously.
All right, let's close with a word of prayer. Nick, can you close this up, please?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening, Lord, and a chance to come to your word. Father, be shaped by the message you gave to Isaiah, Lord. Father, help us to see it for what it is, Lord, how it speaks to your character, to your will for our lives today, Lord. Go beyond what Isaiah was speaking to them then, Lord, but see just how applicable it still is even today. Even though the words he was preaching then still fit so many different ways in our current life today. Lord, we pray for this message Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
It's funny that you mentioned that about